Could it be a turning point for Covid-stricken Brazil and its populist president? Investors taking fright after Jair Bolsonaro's reversal on fuel hikes and the ouster of the market-friendly boss of state oil giant Petrobras. Roberto Costello Branco replaced with a more pliant reserve army general, much to the delight of the truckers union, which backs Bolsonaro. Up to now, the president had been resisting calls to loosen the purse strings for lower-income families left reeling by the pandemic. Will the shakeup signal a U-turn in a nation that's damned if it spends, it's already bleeding red ink, and damned if it doesn't? Whatever way our panel sees it, once again, we're back to talking about Petrobras, a cash cow during the BRICS economy surge, turned symbol of the corruption that brought down the left and led to the election of a Trump-admiring far-right leader in Brazil. Which way now for that South American giant? Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking what's behind the shakeup at Petrobras. Joining us from the capital, Brasilia, Heitor Freire, Member of Parliament for Jair Bolsonaro's PSL. Many thanks for speaking with us.
Be on the show and to be participating on this debate.
Joining us from Angers in Western France, Glauber Cesarino, sociologist and co-chair of the Other Brazils Association. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you again. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Here in the studio, we're joined by France 24's Tatiana Reiter. How are you?
Hi, François.
All right, the France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Brazil's president plowing ahead with the ouster of Roberto Costello Branco at the head of Petrobras and tapping 71-year-old Joaquim Silva e Luna, who has no oil business experience, currently runs the Itaipu Binacional hydroelectric dam. That's at the border with Paraguay. As for Petrobras, it's recovered since Monday more than half of the 20% share price it lost when the news had been announced. Yinka Oyetade has more.
It's a boardroom reshuffle that has triggered a shockwave on the markets. President Jair Bolsonaro is set to replace current Petrobras CEO with Army General and longtime ally Joaquim Silva e Luna. The announcement sent the company's share price tumbling, as investors fear the move could mean the government intervening more in the business world.
Então tem impacto na economia muito grande quando há uma ingerência e o mercado se desarruma, né? Então ele precisa compreender melhor isso e precisa ter pouco mais de sensibilidade de como é a dinâmica da economia.
The oil giant has seen billions of euros wiped from its market value since the announcement. Petrobras' current CEO, Roberto Costello Branco, had set oil prices in line with market rates. While it attracted international investors, the policy was condemned by populist President Bolsonaro, and he's not alone. The oil giant had announced last week that it would raise petrol and diesel prices. In response, Brazil's lorry drivers have threatened to go on strike.
Com certeza, vai ter que ter a briga aí do presidente aí da República aí para ver se consegue abaixar o valor do combustível aí que tá absurdo.
Bolsonaro has warned that he will be taking action in other industries. Next in line, the state electricity company, where the president has also pledged to intervene.
Let's try to begin with you, Tatiana Reiter, and just understand what's behind this shakeup.
So it's important to think that in about a year, we're going to have elections again. So Bolsonaro is already trying to gather, his support. And recently, we've seen gas prices just skyrocket. Truck drivers, when they go get gas right now, they've seen record spikes. And this has led them to pressure the government because they want to strike. This would cause, of course, a blockade of the economy as well, because truckers are a very important part of that. And so this shakeup, this current head of Petrobras, he was supposed to leave in any case in March. His term finishes in March. So this was about replacing him, not so much as firing him, and replacing him with someone who has done quite well at his past post at the hydroelectric dam. He has been quite successful there, cutting costs. So I guess Bolsonaro is hoping to see that at Petrobras as well.
And yet, the markets didn't like it, Heitor Freire. They took fright with bond prices going, the bond spread going up, the share price of Petrobras going through the floor on Monday. Why is this scaring investors?
Unfortunately, the market has interpreted this act of the president in a wrong way. The president has actually this right, constitutional right, to recommend the president of Petrobras. And he has not taken someone who is not known or has no experience on the market. He's taken a general who is of his trust, and at the same time is running a big binational company. It's an international public company between Paraguay and Brazil. It's Itaipu. And he's been quite successful managing this big public company. So Bolsonaro is actually hoping that the general will do the same on Petrobras. And we need to remember that the actual Roberto Costello Branco's mandate is expiring in a month. So the president actually is doing the right. He's recommending the future president to firstly to the committee and then to the presidential place at Petrobras. Unfortunately, as I said, the market has understood on a wrong way, but the president is recommending a good person with an honest background, with a good managerial skills, and is also of his trust.
Glauber Severino, do you agree?
The problem is not there. The problem is that the price policies in Petrobras was changed in 2016, and for now, the price of oil and the derivative of oil are based in the international market and not in the internal market. And so, for a real problem, that is the price that skyrocketed this last year because of this indexation of the price in Brazil with the international market, the president proposed a false solution again with the military. We have already more than 1/3 of the state companies in Brazil, federal state company in Brazil, now managed by military at the reserve or inactive. So we have a real problem. The price do not correspond with the local situation in Brazil. The price is skyrocketed mostly because we have to gain some market value for Petrobras and not. We are not interested in solving the problem with the situation in Brazil. And so for this problem, what Bolsonaro said, I'm going to change. It's not his prerogative to change the president of Petrobras. It's the board who have to change the president of Petrobras. And so, again, we have a false solution to a real problem. And this is why Bolsonaro do that, because he tried to reach his supporter for 2022, like said before. So it's only some kind of marketing strategy to reach his support. That's why the market are afraid. The market are afraid because Bolsonaro is too much erratic. Bolsonaro does not have a real policy about Petrobras.
Because there's a track record, Heitor Freire, when it comes to Petrobras. There had been the hopes in the market that Mr. Branco would perhaps stay on. He had halved the size of the company's debt. And now, as we head towards this electoral cycle, Heitor Freire, the fear is it's going to be spend, 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 and investors don't like it.
Oh, you are correct. We don't like as well politics intervention on a public company. We don't like that. But remember, Roberto Costello Branco's mandate is expiring in 1 month. So the president is doing the right thing. He recommends someone to the board, and then the board recommends the president. So he's following the right steps. And the general is someone well-known, well-respected. He's a former minister on the former government of Michel Temer's government. He was a minister. So he's taken, just because he's a general, a former general on Brazilian army, he's not, that's the complaint of the dear colleague that just spoke. But he's a well-known, respected public management president on Itaipu. He's doing a good job. He's a former minister, and Bolsonaro is following the right steps. I think the market will understand in few days. Bolsonaro is not trying to intervene on a politics on a public company. He's following the right steps, and as soon as the market understands, they will calm down and the prices will come back as normal on a stock market. It's as normal. It's business as usual. It goes up and down. It will go up again in a few days. That's actually an advice to the stock companies.
All right, the state owns a little more than a third of the shares of the company, but it's got 50.5% of voting rights at Petrobras. Over the weekend, President Jair Bolsonaro unapologetic over the change.
Eu tenho que governar, trocar as peças que porventura não estejam dando certo. E se a imprensa está preocupada com a troca de ontem, na semana que vem teremos mais. O que não falta para mim é coragem para decidir, pensando no bem maior da nossa nação.
Okay, so you said at the outset, Tatiana Reiter, that next could be the electricity sector. That's what he's alluding to there.
Yes, he is thinking about that. Electricity prices now are really, really high. I know of people who are having to face an average of 40 degrees a day, and they cannot turn on the air conditionings or even the fan because it's too high. So again, going back to the point of he really needs to think about his supporters ahead of the election. But I think what's also making the markets unstable is that he doesn't seem to have a clear economic policy. Now, this is a president that from the beginning said, I don't want to talk about the economy. I don't know anything about the economy. That's why I'm appointing my minister, and he's an economist who knows what's happening. He even used to poke fun at Dilma Rousseff's former president because she was an economist and she left the government in the worst recession in history. So he does not have a clear path. The markets don't know where he's leading us. He came with this promise of privatization that has not at all been the case so far.
All right, and we're in the midst of this pandemic right now, and people want the prices not to go up, don't they? And as a result, are we witnessing now a U-turn? Is it the end of the free market reforms?
The pandemic kind of put a pause on economic measures because as you know, everywhere in the world, everything came to a halt to focus on this. But is it the end? I'm not so sure. We're seeing a lot of other changes in government. The president of the Congress and Senate, they have recently changed. And the Senate and the Congress were really putting a halt to economic measures that the Minister of the Economy was trying to implement. So perhaps with this new change, because they are allies of Bolsonaro, perhaps we will see more privatizations. But the markets are really worried that that's not going to be the case. He's really going against the promises he's made.
Glauber Cesarino, there's what the markets are worried about and there's what ordinary citizens are worried about. And I know that right now there's a big tussle going on between Bolsonaro and Congress over how much stimulus Brazil can afford. Your thoughts on that?
About the stimulus and the conditions of the population in Brazil vis-a-vis the Petrobras. Like I said before, the policy of prices of Petrobras changed in 2016. After this date, the price was indexed with the oil and price in the international market. This is why the price skyrocketed, because the commodity, the oil as a commodity, skyrocketed these last few months. But this kind of policy reflects some market shocks in the international oil industry and its derivatives, neglects three fundamental aspects. That one, the capacity to serve the domestic market in Brazil, a coordination of distribution, and the internationalization of the volatility of this international oil market. This kind of policy is adopted in countries who are very more dependent on oil imports. There is not the case of Brazil. There is not absolutely the case of Brazil. The specificity of the supply market in Brazil should lead to a more flexibility flexible pricing policy. Our refineries are regionally concentrated. The oil produced is by the state-owned Petrobras supply more than 90% of these refineries, whose production can supply almost the entire domestic consumption in Brazil if Bolsonaro and Paulo Guedes do not destroy the refineries in Brazil. That is the politics of the government, to solve the refineries in Brazil, to produce only brute oil, to export in the international market and buy derivatives of oil to the internal market in Brazil. So we can change the person who are going to lead Petrobras, but if we not change the policies of Petrobras of making the prices to the population, the problem will not be solved. The problem will not be solved. We are using in Brazil a price policy that Austria a country that do not produce oil uses.
But Glauber, let me ask you, because we have viewers watching this show from other oil-producing nations, places like Nigeria, where subsidy caps were lifted when the prices were low during the pandemic, and there's the view that those subsidies in the long run are really bad for things like the environment, are really bad as well for ordinary citizens, because it doesn't, in the end of the day, it doesn't incite to saving energy.
Of course, that is the real big problem, because we are not discussing the shift in energy sources in Brazil. That is the problem that it's bigger than Petrobras problem that we are discussing right now. But we are not going to address this problem if we do not think first of all about the Petrobras and what is the mission of Petrobras. Petrobras is to letting reach richer and richer the board and the stock owners of Petrobras, because now that is the problem. That's why the markets are afraid right now, because if the price, the value of the market value of Petrobras shut down, the owners of the stocks are going to take a good hit. But Petrobras, what is the mission of Petrobras? To enrich the stock owners, or to address the concern and the issues of the population in Brazil? This discussion is not on the table right now.
Heitor Ferri, do you agree that Petrobras, the state oil company, should be seen more as a public service?
I do agree with mostly what Mr. Cesarinos spoke. What I would actually implement, in my view, is that I personally do not like interventions. I like more of a liberal agenda. And in my sense, and what I defend is actually that Petrobras should be privatized. The government shouldn't be involved in managing public companies. We should actually make reforms and privatizations. We are putting some companies now, we're starting this discussion now in Congress of Petrobras and some other companies for privatization. And I defend that Petrobras should be one of the next companies that should be privatized. We should less the size of the state. The state should be worried with other things, but not managing public companies. So what the Mr. Cesarino spoke is right in some sense, but I would complement saying that I defend a privatization to the service get more efficient and better for the Brazilians and for the company stockholders and for everyone.
All right, we're going to pick up on that point when we come back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're wondering if there's perhaps a bit of a 180-degree turn being taken by the government of Jair Bolsonaro with the president who came in with the promise of free market reforms. But now, as we get closer to elections slated for October of next year, the president changing the guard at the head of the state oil firm Petrobras, putting a halt to the lifting of state subsidies on oil and gas, on fuel prices, and promising more such measures. With us from Brasilia, Jair Freire, member of parliament from Bolsonaro's PSL party. Welcome back as well to Glauber Ceresino, who joins us from Angers, a sociologist, co-president of the Autre Brésil, Other Brazil's association. France 24's very own Tatiana Reiter is with us in the studio. And for part two of our discussion, we welcome from the Canadian capital, Ottawa, Ilona Szabo, president of the Igarapé Institute think tank. Welcome to the show. At a Monday press conference, Jair Bolsonaro, when we were just talking about this idea of whether or not Bolsonaro is going to go through with the privatizations he promised, Bolsonaro bringing out his economy minister and denying any whiff of a hint of a rift with the free market thinker Paulo Guedes.
Que, obviamente, por ser homem que decide as finanças no governo, ele tem amigos e opositores. Mas todo mundo, a todos ele tratou com muita galhardia. E nós precisamos da economia para vencer a pandemia.
So, Ilona Szabo, is that a true vote of confidence, or is that the kind of vote of confidence you hear from a football owner who's about to sack the manager?
Well, it's important to say that, honestly, if you just understand a little bit President Bolsonaro's career, he was never a liberal. He himself voted against basically all reforms that were proposed in the last decades in Brazil. So the appointing of Minister Paulo Guedes, of course, was to get the support from the market. But in the political front, the president was never upfront trying to push for the reforms. There's no political articulation to do that for real. Even with the reform that was just approved, the pension reform under the former president of the chamber, Rodrigo Maia, was pretty much the articulation of Congress. So I would say, it's not unexpected that this is happening. And I also would say that it's very hard to understand how Paulo Guedes is still there if he defends what he does, because basically I don't see he has enough power to just go through his reforms. I'm not defending or saying anything against. I'm just saying his agenda is not a priority agenda for the president.
And Guedes and the outgoing head of Petrobras, Roberto Costello Branco, they both went to the University of Chicago. They're close. Is it a slap in the face for Guedes, this replacing him with this Reserve Army general?
I think that anything that is done so abruptly, just sends very bad signs to the market and also to the ones that are looking into Brazil as a whole, because this is not the only, I would say, abrupt issue that is being treated today. So I would say even when we hear what the General Luna is saying, which is a very respected general, but it's just one more general in an administration that is becoming each day more militarized. And, with all respect I have for the Brazilian army, generals, they follow rules. So the capacity of critical thinking, of discussions of what are the better public policies, and so on, are always, in my view, and we see this in the Ministry of Health, we see this in other positions of governments that now are taken by generals. It's more or less the will of the president. There is not a lot of discussion or debate, and public policy needs, plural views and needs society engagement. And I don't see this happening. This is diminishing each day in Brazil.
Jair Freire, just before the break, you said if you had it your way, Petrobras would be privatized and we wouldn't be having this discussion. If that were the case, do you think Petrobras would pick as its next CEO a man who's not had any oil and gas experience?
Well, we voted on Bolsonaro, thinking on the liberal economy ways that he promised. And I do defend the same thing. The government, the size of the state, of the Brazilian state, is too big. If I start telling you what the government owns, it's over 500 companies. It's quite a lot. The state in Brazil, it's so heavy. It's too big. And when we look at the a liberal agenda, we actually, and what we hoped that Bolsonaro would do is would actually reduce the size of the Brazilian state. I think Petrobras and many other companies should be privatized, and we wouldn't have this problem of efficiency or of corruption, because they would fire, they would have more efficiency and transparency.
But you agree they wouldn't be hiring, if it was privatized, they wouldn't be hiring reserve army generals?
We should, just because he's a general, they are condemning him. The problem is, there's no problem because he's a general. Brazilian army is actually a way of us feeling quite pride of his background. But what we look at is he was a former minister in a former government. He's been a successful management in one of the biggest Brazilian and South American companies, which is Itaipu Binational. So he has experience. Saying that he has not experience, it's not true.
All right, let's broaden the discussion here a minute. For all the talk of Brazil diversifying its economy, we're still talking about oil. Petrobras is still at the heart of it. The nation's fortunes still seem overly tied to commodity prices, in particular that of crude, currently now flirting with two-year highs, thus the social pressures that Tatiana Reiter was describing in part one of our discussion. And just think back to 2003. Back then, crude was on a steady climb that would take it to $140 a barrel.
Continuo sonhando em construir uma sociedade justa, solidária, fraterna, aonde o resultado da riqueza produzida no país seja distribuída de forma mais equânime para todos os filhos deste país.
The words of Brazil's embattled former president there, do Brazilians still adhere to that? We heard Glauber in part one of our discussion say that Petrobras should have more of a public service mission. Those words from 2003, do they still resonate today?
I think today people are aware of the huge corruption scandal behind Petrobras. So hearing that, it's interesting because, sharing the money, the profits with everybody has not really been the case. But do they still want Petrobras to continue, sharing the profit? Yes, of course. But now there's perhaps Petrobras has a really bad fame, also with investors, because after the corruption scandals, with the Lava Jato corruption scandals, Petrobras lost a lot of money as well from investors. So it is a company that has a really bad reputation in Brazil and abroad.
Glauber Severino, it's the word. You agree the words of Lula have lost their luster because of Operation Car Wash, because of scandal surrounding the oil money.
In part, yes, but I think the words of Lula do not resonate today because we have a society that is mostly polarized since 2016, 2017. So one part of the population will not take any word of Lula to granted, and is going to reject this his word just because he's Lula. Another part is gonna say if Lula said it's okay, it's a good word. In between, we have 30-40% of the population who don't know where to stand, but they have now a president that uses this polarization to reach to his supporters. All the time, all the time. This is why, in one sense, he puts militaries all the time in the government. We're talking about more than 100,000 of militaries in the state now. We talk about 9 ministers. We have more military ministers than Venezuela, the communist devil of Bolsonaro. This is incredible. We have more military ministers than 3 or 4 or 5 military presidents in the dictatorship in Brazil. So we have a militarization of the state in Brazil right now. Why? Because Bolsonaro tried to reach to his supporter, who has a fantasy of the time when Brazil was ruled by the militaries, and the militaries who do not show their corruption. Itaipu, for instance, the corruption in the construction of Itaipu in the dictatorship in Brazil was huge, but the military do not allow to talk about this kind of corruption. So this new corruption, it's new. It's only about that. The question about Petrobras, for instance, and I want to talk about the possibility of privatization. The privatization of Petrobras is going to be a big problem. Like Vale, for instance. Vale was a state-owned company. They privatized Vale, and we have a lot of environmental crimes committed by Vale. We have the barrage. They are destroyed because Vale do not do his work. In this kind of strategic economic areas, the state must control. The state must be present to assure the security, to assure the transition to a cleaner form of energy in Brazil, and to assure the prices that correspond to the needs of the population. That's why we cannot privatize Petrobras, because if you privatize Petrobras, the stockholders are gonna be even more richer, and the population is gonna be even more poor.
Ilona Szabo, it sounds, listening to this discussion, like, well, there's a deadlock in Brazil.
But it's a deadlock.
I think we're very far from privatizing Petrobras, François, but I'll let you ask the question.
Go ahead, Ilona Szabo, please.
Yeah, sure. I think there are fundamental questions here. Like Petrobras should be turning into, for example, an energy company, not only an oil company. Brazil is a signatory of the Paris Agreement. We are absolutely lagging behind in all our commitments. We are not doing nearly enough, on the opposite, to protect the Amazon forest. So I think the whole strategic view of the country in the moment, to be honest, there is no strategic view. It comes from the society, not from the government. And there are a few, ministries trying to do their job. If you agree or not with the policies, I would say the economy is one of them, but it's being bypassed by the president's rules like most of the time. So what I see in my country, unfortunately, is that there is no vision. There is a vision of destruction of public policies that already worked, be in the area of environment, be education, be foreign policy, be human rights. I see very little trust because of this erratic behavior of the president and the inner circle that just, I would say, follows whatever is in his mind.
But trust in neither side, right? I mean, that's what Tatiana was alluding to when she was talking about the corruption scandals that have dogged the left as well. I saw, Ilona, the latest opinion polls show that the approval rating of Bolsonaro is down, but that's probably the wrong question, isn't it? The proper question should be, who can beat the outgoing president? Right now, who can?
Well, we really need to overcome polarization in Brazil. This is honestly killing the country. Like we see if we see the crisis that we're going through today, the number of deaths of COVID due to a total mismanagement of the crisis and the denial of the crisis, the environmental crisis, a constant political crisis, an economic crisis. So there are several crises, and I come from a sector of society that is being totally shut. So the civic space in Brazil is shut down. So we have no accent. I mean, we cannot sit at the table anymore. Public policy, like voluntary councils, are shut. Dialogue is shut. So we desperately need to open like a moderation field in Brazil that will just overcome this very tragic polarization that is toxic and that is, I would say, trying to bring us back in time. Like we are losing the advances we did in the last decades in several key strategic areas. And that's something that needs to be said. I mean, we need to definitely have a democratic front that will unite the moderates of this country to just win this polarization, because nobody is really earning or just can profit this way. Only the people that have no, I would say, public interest at its core. So I'm very worried about the situation. I don't see an answer right now, but I do hope that there will be one, which will definitely need a united front against the polls.
Heitor Freire, do you agree that, because we've been talking a lot about the militarization of top government posts, but there has been, more importantly, a militarization of rhetoric in Brazil? I know social media is fueled by outrage and fury, but that there's a lot of bombast and it makes it hard to sit down and compromise.
I do not see any problems of the government having former generals and army personnel. I don't see any problems as long as they have the skills to do the job. There's not a problem. It would be the same thing applied for attorneys being in the government, or of managers, or doctors, or any other profession. I don't see any problems of that. As long as we are in a democracy in Brazil, and as long as we support our democracy, defend our democracy, there's not a problem. So we will have elections next year. We have still nearly 2 years, nearly 2 years for the elections. I don't think that our focus now are elections. We have a big pandemic. We are on a fight against COVID. We have to focus on this fight at this moment. The whole world is actually suffering from this pandemic, and Brazil is the same thing. We were not prepared. Our country were on a developing economy, and we were taken on a surprise. So we have more important points to focus on the moment, and I would say COVID is the biggest focus at this moment.
Tatiana Reiter, when Jair Bolsonaro was elected, he expressed his admiration for Donald Trump. And I know journalists in the newsroom, whatever they think of Trump, it's a little bit of the stress level has gone down. He says we don't have to follow the Twitter feed all the time, which had, again, a lot of bombast and a lot of vitriol in it. Donald Trump is gone, but his recipe for getting elected, could it get Jair Bolsonaro reelected next time around?
You're saying, and we no longer have to check Twitter as much, but this announcement for the new Petrobras president was made on Facebook, so that's not completely gone just yet. I think for the next election, it's going to be difficult for Bolsonaro because he shot himself in the foot twice, I believe, recently with the COVID-19 pandemic, recently saying also he has nothing, he can't do anything about the deaths, about the infections. And also he recently, Operation Car Wash was recently dismantled. And this was one of the things that got him elected, appointing, former Justice Minister Sergio Moro as a minister was part of the reason why he got elected. So, and we might see Lula come back into the picture as well.
But do you see, picking up on Ilana Szabo's point
Right.
about how right now there's no space for dialogue, there's no space for moderation in Brazil. Do you see any possibility of that changing?
At the moment, I do not think so. No, I don't understand how that could be. Perhaps new candidates for the new election will change the tone, But now social media has been established and populism has been established as the way to get elected. So we'll have to see. We don't have any candidates right now that are coming forward with new ideas.
Very briefly, Glauber Cesarino, do you see him?
No, it's not possible because Bolsonaro, that is his government plan, reach every time, all the time to his supporter and do not govern the Brazil. He goes out every time to say incredible things about pandemic, about the Petrobras, about the economic in Brazil. He's in campaign since 2018.
Ilano Szabo, that's the recipe. You don't need to convince the other side. You don't need to reach a compromise. You just need to energize those who follow you.
Yeah, it's important to just say that Brazil's democracy is under threat. It's being attacked and destroyed from within, like in Hungary, like in Poland, like it was the intent in the US. So we are under severe distress. And I would say this election is very vital for Brazil's democracy. So as a civil society leader and as someone that reaches out to the country, we are in charge now to just build options to just really don't allow our democracy to be again under threat after all we passed during the dictatorship. So we need to find a way. I think we have a short time. It's not going to be easy because as the other were saying, we have a government that follows Trump's steps like every single day. And they have a machine, which is like the hate machine that destroys opponents' reputations, closes dissent. And this is becoming a truth also in government institutions. So we have to just do what we're doing here to show what's going on and just make sure our rights and freedoms are respected. Not going to be easy, but we have a big fight now.
All right, and
for our democracy.
All right, we'll continue the conversation. I want to thank all of you for joining us. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I want to thank Heitor Freire in Brasilia. I want to thank Tatiana Reiter, who's with us here. Glauber Cesarino in Angers, France, and from Ottawa, Ilona Szabo. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.